All right, so welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today, we're going deep on the Indian rhinoceros.
Oh, fascinating
I
choice.
know, right? And I have to say, this essay we're working with, the Indian rhinoceros, a living icon of conservation.
Hmm.
It really got me thinking, how did this creature go from almost vanishing, like completely, to being this symbol of hope for conservation?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's this incredible story of resilience and how human choices can impact things, and then ultimately a conservation success story, which is always inspiring.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so before we get to that comeback part, I kind of want to like paint a picture for everyone listening. Imagine you're trekking through this like really dense forest,
Right.
say in Kaziranga National Park in India,
All right.
and suddenly this massive creature just emerges,
Oh, wow.
right, with like thick armor-like skin and full
Oh, I
of,
see.
I mean, we're talking massive, like 2,200 to 4,800 pounds, 6 feet tall at the shoulder. And then, of course, there's that single black horn, which can be like up to 25 inches long.
Yeah, that horn's not just for looks though. It's made of keratin, which is the same stuff as our
Oh,
fingernails.
wow.
But the way it's structured, strong and kind of curved, makes it like this super effective tool for defense, digging, even foraging for food.
Oh, that's cool, like a multi-purpose tool.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the whole picky eater thing. The essay mentions they're only found in specific spots, like grasslands and wetlands, forests, mainly in northern India and Nepal. So why is that?
Well, these locations offer the perfect rhino diet: lush grasses, leaves, aquatic plants, fruits, you name it. They've got it all there.
Like a buffet?
It is. And, you might be surprised to hear this, but the Indian rhino is actually semi-aquatic. So
Mm.
they spend a good chunk of their time in the water.
Oh,
It
interesting.
helps them regulate their temperature, keeps those pesky insects away.
It's like their own like spa day.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, but here's the thing I gotta ask. With all these like amazing adaptations, how did they almost go extinct in the 20th century? I mean, fewer than 200 individuals. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of the impact we have.
Yeah.
It's excessive hunting for their horns. People used to believe falsely that they had medicinal properties, and then you've got habitat loss due to agriculture expanding, urbanization. It was a bad combination.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. But thankfully humans kind of realize like, hey, wait a minute, we got to do something, right? This is where that living icon of conservation part comes in, which I'm super intrigued by. What were like the turning points? What changed?
Well, it was really a group effort.
Yeah.
Governments, NGOs, local communities, everyone saw the urgency and came together. They put in strict anti-poaching measures, started restoring the degraded habitats, and importantly, they got local people involved in the conservation efforts.
So they didn't just like come in and say this is how we're doing it. They actually involved the people who live there.
Right, exactly.
That's smart. And I'm guessing it worked. The essay mentioned the global population is now around 4,000.
It did.
That's incredible. Like dedicated work really can bring a species back from the brink.
It absolutely can.
Wow. But it's not just about like the numbers, right? The essay talks about how the Indian rhino, it's not just surviving, it's like shaping its environment. It's a mega herbivore, and that plays a role.
Yeah, that's right. Their grazing habits, they actually help maintain the diversity of plant life, which in turn supports, a whole bunch of other species. It's like this interconnected web.
Oh, that's cool. So saving the rhino means saving so much more than just one species.
Exactly.
Okay, but if things are going so well now, why does the essay also mention like ongoing challenges? Like what are they still up against?
Well, unfortunately, the fight's not over yet. Poaching is still a threat.
Yep.
The illegal horn trade is still out there. And then climate change is adding a whole other layer of complexity: rising temperatures, unpredictable rainfall. It all impacts their habitats. It's a reminder that conservation is an ongoing process.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like you reach a certain number and then you're good. You have to keep going.
Right, exactly.
So, even with this amazing comeback story, there are still like obstacles to overcome. I'm curious, what are some of the specific like tactics being used to combat these challenges?
That's a really good question, and it's something we should definitely dig into further. But before we get into that, let's maybe step back and look at the bigger picture for a second. The illegal wildlife trade, for example.
Mm.
It's not just about rhinos.
Right.
It's a global issue with huge consequences.
Yeah, but it's like a web almost. Like all these threads connecting different species and ecosystems.
Yeah. It is. It is. It's very complex.
Sounds kind of overwhelming, honestly.
It can be. Yeah.
So how do we even begin to like untangle that?
It's a tough one. But there are people working really hard to combat it. Organizations like Traffic, for instance, they're doing amazing work monitoring the wildlife trade and trying to disrupt these trafficking networks. But it's not just about enforcement, you
Yeah.
know? Addressing the demand side of things is crucial too.
Oh, so that's like changing consumer behavior, right?
Yeah.
And like tackling cultural perceptions and finding other ways for people who are maybe involved in the trade to make a living.
Right, exactly. It's a multi-pronged approach. And
Yeah.
it takes collaboration.
Yeah.
Governments, NGOs, local communities, individuals, we all have a role to play.
Okay. So connecting this back to the Indian rhino, it's like a reminder that success in conservation often comes down to getting multiple stakeholders involved,
Yeah.
not just like one group coming in and saying, this is how it's going to be.
Right, exactly.
So the Indian rhino story, it's not just about one species. It's like a model for how to tackle these bigger, more complex conservation challenges.
Yeah, it really is. And by exploring those connections, we can get a much deeper understanding of what it really takes to protect not just individual species, but the whole web of life that supports us all.
Mm. Well, this is already giving me a lot to think about. You mentioned that poaching and habitat loss, they're not unique to the Indian rhino. So what other species are facing these kinds of threats, and what lessons can we learn from the rhino's success?
That's an excellent question, and it's a perfect segue into some other examples. Let's start with a close relative of the Indian rhino, actually, the African black rhino. They're facing a very similar situation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we're diving into the African black rhino now. Are they facing that same like 1-2 punch of poaching and habitat loss as the Indian rhino?
Yeah, it's a pretty similar story, unfortunately.
Right.
Critically endangered and poaching for their horns is still a huge problem. That demand from the illegal wildlife trade just doesn't seem to go away.
Right.
And then you have habitat loss, which is made worse by things like human population growth and needing more land for agriculture. It's a tough situation.
It's like history repeating itself in a way.
Yeah, it is.
But you mentioned that there are some similar strategies being used to try and protect them. So are we seeing like those same collaborative efforts that worked for the Indian rhinos? Are they trying those in Africa too?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of times in conservation, you see people adapting successful approaches from other places. So with the African black rhino, you see those same core elements.
Mm.
Anti-poaching patrols, trying to deter the poachers, community engagement programs to get local people involved, even translocation programs where they carefully move rhinos to establish new populations in safer areas.
Mm. So it's like taking what worked in India and tweaking it, tailoring it to the specific challenges in Africa.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. It's encouraging to know that there's a blueprint for success that can be, kind of adapted to different situations.
Yeah.
But what about other species, right? Like ones that are facing threats beyond poaching and habitat loss. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked about that web of threats earlier.
Right. It's not always so straightforward.
Yeah.
Well, let's consider the Sumatran orangutan, for example. They're critically endangered, but the main driver there is deforestation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mostly driven by the demand for palm oil.
Palm oil. I've heard of that.
It's in everything, food, cosmetics, you name it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different kind of challenge, right? We're not just talking about like stopping poachers. We're talking about like changing consumer behavior, like
Yeah.
tackling entire industries.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our choices, the things we do every day, they have consequences. So in this case, it means pushing for sustainable palm oil production, supporting companies that are doing things the right way, making informed choices as consumers.
Right.
But, it also means protecting and restoring the habitat that's left.
So are we saying that like to save a species like the Sumatran orangutan, it's not enough to just like protect the animals themselves. You have to like understand the economics of it, the consumer forces at play.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It highlights how conservation, it's not just about protecting animals in isolation. It's about understanding all these relationships between humans, animals, and the environment we all share.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It is.
This is making me realize just how interconnected everything really is.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that we shouldn't forget about the oceans too. So what's happening there? What kind of challenges are they facing?
Well, the oceans are facing their own set of problems, often driven by us, by human activities.
Yeah.
Take sharks and rays, for instance. Many species are under immense pressure from overfishing, and a lot of that is driven by the demand for shark fin soup, which is
Yeah.
considered a delicacy in some cultures.
Shark fin soup. Yeah, yeah, I've heard of that. It's supposed to be like a luxury item, right?
Right.
So we're back to that demand issue again, but this time it's impacting like a whole different ecosystem.
Right.
What kind of consequences are we seeing from overfishing sharks? Like what happens when they start to disappear?
Well, sharks is what we call apex predators. So they sit at the top of the food chain, and they play a really crucial role in keeping the whole marine ecosystem in balance.
Okay.
So when their populations decline, it can have this ripple effect throughout the whole food web. You start to see imbalances. Other species can be harmed. It's like removing a keystone from an arch. The whole structure becomes unstable.
That's a good analogy. It's a sobering reminder that what we do on land, it doesn't stay on land. It can have these huge impacts on the oceans too.
Absolutely. It all comes back to that interconnectedness we keep talking about.
Right, right. But are there any glimmers of hope when it comes to the oceans? I mean, you mentioned earlier that sometimes we get so bogged down in all the negative stuff.
Yeah, it's important to celebrate the wins for
Um,
sure, and there have been some incredible success stories in ocean conservation. The recovery of the humpback whale is a fantastic example. You know, they were hunted almost to extinction, but thanks to international cooperation and a lot of effort, including a global ban on commercial whaling, their populations have bounced back significantly.
Wow. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
It's inspiring to hear about species like the humpback whale making a comeback.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
But it sounds like the challenges are pretty immense. So is there anything like we as individuals can actually do to make a difference? I mean, in the face of these huge problems, it can feel kind of helpless sometimes.
That's a really important question, and the answer is a definite yes. You don't have to be a scientist or a policymaker to contribute to conservation. There are lots of things we can all do in our everyday lives.
Okay, so give us some examples. What are some concrete actions we can take?
Well, a great place to start is supporting organizations that are out there on the ground, actually doing the work to protect species and habitats.
Hmm.
You know, even small donations can make a big difference.
So put your money where your mouth is, basically.
Yeah, in a way.
Mm.
But it's also about being informed, you know, educating yourself about the issues, talking to your friends and family about them. Use your voice to advocate for change. Remember, collective action, it starts with individual awareness.
Right. So knowledge is power, and sharing that knowledge is key. What about our daily choices? Can those really make a difference?
Absolutely. Every choice we make has an impact, whether we realize it or not. Choosing sustainable seafood, reducing our plastic consumption, supporting companies that have good environmental practices. These are all ways to vote with our wallets, you know, to show that we care.
Yeah, it's like sending a message to businesses and policymakers that we care about the environment and we're going to support those who are prioritizing sustainability.
Exactly.
But with so many issues out there and so much information, it can feel overwhelming knowing where to start. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get involved but feels kind of paralyzed by the sheer scale of it all?
That's a common feeling, and I think the key is to find what really resonates with you personally.
Hmm.
What are you passionate about? What issue really speaks to you? Once you've identified that, then do some research. Find an organization or a cause that aligns with your values and get involved.
Okay.
It could be volunteering your time, donating to a conservation organization, or just making more conscious choices in your everyday life.
Yeah.
Even small actions, when you multiply them across millions of people, they can have a a huge positive impact.
So it's about finding that personal connection and then channeling that passion into action, no matter how big or small.
Exactly. And remember, conservation is it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's about learning and adapting and working together to create a more sustainable and harmonious future for everyone.
Through all these conversations about different species and all the challenges they face, it really strikes